My name's Glenn Price, and I'm, as John has said, I'm the Regional Managing Director for Teletech Consulting in Europe. You asked in your previous presentation how many from CIO, security officers, marketing officers. Before I dive in today, I do come from an IT background, so I feel very, very comfortable here seeing the brand Hewlett-Packard. I spent much of my career there, and when I wasn't at HP, I was at Apple. So there are some parts of today that you will notice actually are in a logical framework, and then there's others that I've learnt to explore with you that are a little bit more comfortable, right, if that makes sense. I've been asked to speak to you today about how extraordinary leaders have an impact or drive customer loyalty. And I think you'd agree, two subjects that in 20 minutes I can only raise our awareness to. There are over 1,400 different definitions of the word leader that we could find. And when you look at customer loyalty, would you agree that if we had 150, 200 people in this room and we asked you to define it as we walked out, we'd probably have 150, 200 definitions of what we mean by that, whether you're a CMO and maybe looking at a consumer perspective, or for some of us where we're managing our own teams, right? But I do believe by putting these two things together, we can deliver some results and help you achieve your goals. And I've got 3 goals for today. The first is to add some value. Now, I'm sure, how many people have been to this before? Just so that I could see I missed it before. So a few of you, typically at this stage, you'll be sitting in your seat, you're not having to work that hard, the email's been checked, you will cross your legs like this, you will fold your arms like this, lean back, there's a great example just in here, and you'll go, try and teach me anything, mate, on these 2 subjects. So I'm just letting you know I do exactly the same thing. I will be working as hard as I can to add as much value, because to be honest, we've all been to these things, walked out and gone, that's a day of my life I can't get back. True? Right? So I'll be working as hard as I can. What I would say is you've already decided how much value you'll get from these presentations that we're going through, and so I might remind you of that as we go through. Second goal is to try and have some fun. I'm half German, half Italian, right? So trust me, everything I'm doing is in a logical order, and I will finish on time. However, my mother would say that we should slow down a little bit and actually connect, create a relationship between the two of us. And I'd like to try out an experiment. Can I have you on your feet for just a moment, right? Just a moment. And I'd like to run an experiment with you. I'd like you to place your hands about 12 inches apart. About 12 inches. 12 inches, sir. Yeah, there we go. Right, 12 inches. I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. When I get to 3, you're going to clap and keep your hands together. If you miss, bit embarrassing, just go again, right? 1, 2, 3, clap. Now I want you to look down at your hands. Our research and our psych unit suggests that you'll either have your left thumb over your right thumb over your left thumb, or your thumbs are straight down the middle. Let's start with left over right. Big show of hands, left over right. I'm expecting plenty of them in the room. Excellent, high and proud. Our research would suggest, not in every case, keep them up, we need to know who you are, right? This would suggest that you are the more rational people. If I'm going into a firefight, this is the people I want. They've got a plan, they execute well, they're able to get people behind them. Let's try, thank you very much. Look, we've got one guy that's just going, yes, I am rational, right? What about right over lefts? Right over lefts tends to be a smaller group. Nice and high and proud. Excellent. Our research would suggest, not in every chance, not every time, but our research would suggest that these are the more emotional people, or I just say the good-looking, sexy people, right? So take a look at those. Once again, we've got a pocket over there just going, yes, I'm in the sexy group, and down here we've got guys swapping their thumbs, which is not what it's about. What about, here's the most interesting one, thumbs down the middle. Show of hands. Wow, a lot in this room. A lot in this room. Our research would say, in fact, take a look at these ones. Be careful if you're sitting next to one. These are the people who just think that they're rational and emotional, but are neither, right? Give yourselves a big round of applause. Take a seat for me. Please, you know that no, we didn't do any research on that, right? But you feel better that you've stood up. Don't come up to me during the break or at the stand and go, I always knew I was sexy, because then I have to give feedback and it's not good. What I would say is that these 2 subjects directly connect to rational and emotional. And if you ask me, I tend to be a rational person. Under pressure, my father taught me 1, 2, 3, 4, not 1, 4. There are certain steps. And yet, isn't it true that it's a marriage between these two things? We're all rational and emotional, especially when we start looking at the subject of customer loyalty. So we'll try and have some fun. Last of all, my goal is to give you either a tip, a tool, or a strategy that you can use with immediate effect with your teams so that you can actually get some action. Because otherwise, this is all very nice, and we all stroke our egos and network, but we don't deliver anything. True? How many people here have animals? Animal lovers in the room? Few of you. This is a picture of my dog, Sydney. Sydney's a chocolate lab. We have a game that we play. I can't say every day because most of us live at work, but certainly on the weekends, I take Sydney out and we do something that we've done for many years. He knows the rules, I know the rules, right? So we walk to the park, he'll be very happy, I throw the frisbee, his job is to run after it, catch it, return it, and then now I reward him. This is where we're all, in fact, in fairness, we both get rewarded, right? I throw it, he gets his little treat, but he looks up at me, he's very, very loyal. And so I took him down a couple of weekends ago, and I threw the frisbee. A perfect throw, if I do say so myself. It was sailing off into the distance. Sydney's loping after it, tongue hanging from the side, drool coming out on both sides of his face, and then all of a sudden he saw this, squirrel, right? The frisbee continues into the fence, true? I'm going to have to get that later. Sydney bounds up to the tree. Now, I did see enough animal lovers to suggest no squirrels were harmed in the creation of this keynote, right? It's okay, the squirrel runs up, he just looks down at Sydney. If he had nuts, he'd throw them, right? Sydney just sort of jumps around and then comes back to me. Goes into the position, seated, looking up, ready for his treat. I looked down at him, I said, dude, where's the frisbee? You could see his head cocked to one side and go, frisbee? What are you talking about? This is a dog that's incredibly loyal. And I'd like to think that I'm loyal to him, but the reality is all it took to break that loyalty was a single squirrel, not something that I could control. For years, the academics, my teams that we've worked with, our consumers and customers have always told me that loyalty is driven from a relationship. Who would agree with that? Yeah? A level of trust and intimacy tends to drive the relationship, and then we move forward. What's interesting when we work with firms is very rarely do firms measure the degree of relationship, nor do they measure the degree of goodwill or the emotional factor. We can only measure some of the rational, and so they miss this marriage. When I was young, I grew up, my father was in the forces, and I grew up overseas. And so way back there in the 70s, if you can imagine me quite black and just wearing sort of a sarong, we used to climb coconut trees for the American tourists and charge them $1. It was my first business, right? But the big exciting part was when the boats used to come in, the supply boats, because we got fresh food. And that's where my relationship with Oreo Biscuits started, because they could pack them in these tin things. Now, I don't know if you enjoy Oreos. I love them. I'm incredibly loyal to this brand. I don't represent them. They're not a client. I just enjoy eating them. But there is a certain way to eat an Oreo. You dip it in the milk. You twist it, you lick it, and then you crunch it. Any other way is not good, right? You have to do it in this way. How many people here have children? How many people were a child? Oh, he eventually got his hand up. He's like, no, I just arrived, right? Right? So I have two children. They're grown up now. My daughter, Ashley, is 21. My son, Nick, is 18. But when they were young, we used to have movie nights at home. Maybe it's a cold English winter. It's raining outside. We go, bring your friends around. We'll have a pizza night. Against your wife's best advice, you've also given them some Red Bull. So they're bouncing all around the lounge room. And all of a sudden, it hits you. Oreos. You need the Oreos. You walk into the kitchen, there's none left, you've eaten them all the last time, and you go, that's okay, it's 8 o'clock at night, Tesco Express will be open, and you hop in your car. As you walk to the car, Oreos, Oreos, drive in the car, Oreos, Oreos, park the car, Oreos, Oreos, walk in the front door, Oreos, Oreos. You head to the biscuit aisle, Squirrel, right? There's not just Oreo. Can anybody see the Oreos, by the way? They are there. But there's all sorts of things. McVitie's have I don't know how many flavors. There's Cadbury Fingers. There's even Jammy Dodgers. I have been known to come home and my wife goes, did you get the Oreos? And I tilt my head to one side and go, Oreos? What are you talking about, right? I'm loyal to the brand, but all it takes is choice. All it takes is a squirrel, and it begins to change, right? In fact, I would go as far to say that as consumers, we're getting more promiscuous. For those of you who don't deal with end consumers and you're thinking about your internal teams, I mean, for me, running an IT team inside of HP, we got to the stage where actually by the time we finished the projects, the information, or at least the technology, was out of date and we had to start again. Anybody recognize that, right? Try and explain that to the guys upstairs who had, changed the leader every 12 months, and all of a sudden the projects we were working on are different. But we're getting promiscuous. Now, next month, I was writing this keynote, and it reminded me, next month, on the 22nd of October, is my wedding anniversary. And I've been married for 23 years next month. And I'd like to show you a picture of the love of my life. Krispy Kreme donuts, right? Has anybody here had a Krispy Kreme? They're not normal donuts. Look at the smiles on your faces as you raise your hand. Krispy Kreme donuts, if you didn't raise your hand, think about your bucket list, lock this one in. You have to have a Krispy Kreme experience. I'm incredibly loyal to this brand as well. Now, what's interesting in the research for this keynote, I went along and I looked up their website. I'd never been to their website before. And they have a customer loyalty program. In fact, this month, if we all logged in, we could all try and win £5,000. I'm not interested in £5,000, right? This loyalty program means nothing to me. What the company can measure is, do I interact with their loyalty program? What I'm hoping that they can measure is when I walk into the store and Rebecca, the same lady who serves me, I won't say every day, I'll pretend to go once a month, right? She knows why I really buy them. Because they take me back to my childhood when I was in the States, and just the taste, not the new flavors, the original, instantaneously creates a level of intimacy with me that takes me back to being a kid again. And I don't even leave. I eat the donut in the store, ask for another one, and then continue. Now, what I'm not saying is that you don't need a customer loyalty program. What I am saying is I don't believe that you can incentivize or bribe true loyalty. A customer loyalty program is an essential component of the full omni-channel customer experience spectrum, right? Whether you're doing it internal or external. But I wonder whether, back to our rational and emotional, I wonder whether we're measuring that marriage or whether they're slightly separated out. Because for many of us, there's a huge difference between the two. And this interests myself and a team of people. A number of years ago, about 10 years ago now, I took a team of analysts much smarter than me, and we followed the world's best companies, from small rural parts in India all the way going into large multi-country brands that sit inside the Middle East or inside of the Western world in Europe or in the US. And we simply went, what in priority order are the drivers or components that we as leaders could focus on that guarantees that we can deliver a result? How do we take a vision for customer loyalty, whether that be with our own team or consumers, and how do we make sure that we can get to the end and produce that return on investment? Because the reality is, in my world, I'm not sure in yours, if we can't deliver the ROI, you simply get asked to leave. It's not even a tough conversation. They just go, you've got to go. It's as simple as that. It's incredibly rational. Now, you won't probably recognize this, right? I'm sure you've never had this before, but what we found is that most organizations tend to jump from setting a direction for their customer loyalty or whatever their particular goal is, could be an IT project, a security project, straight into what we call enabling and executing. Once again, you won't recognize this, but the other firms out there, you would recognize it by the leaders sitting in a room with very expensive consultants, and then all of a sudden you get an email that nominates you for a work stream that you have no competence, passion, or interest in, and yet you're responsible for it, and now you need to deliver that particular part of the program, right? As I say, I'm sure it's never happened to any of us, right? What was interesting was diving underneath, and we had no theoretical framework. As a consultant, I'm used to designing something and then proving it's true. We actually started with a blank sheet of paper, right? And this is what we found. is that in doing so, they miss the vital components of exceptional execution and performance. Firstly, in engaging and exciting, one, their team or their stakeholders, shareholders for many of us in our companies, or worse, exciting the customer or consumer. You know when the movies come out, the first, I call them drip feeds, right? So the Jason Bourne movie is out. I apologize if people aren't into Jason Bourne or testosterone, but the first ad goes for about 15 seconds, and it just goes, one man, right? And I go, who's the man, right? Next, one man, one gun. Oh, he's going to shoot someone. I don't know what's going to happen. Eventually, you work out it's Jason Bourne. It's going to be the same story that you know from before. He wins in the end, but you still go and see it. There is a process that they've done to excite us. So now we've got a direction. People, you've created a tipping point, if you like, of engagement. You've now got people focused on something that they want to do. And last of all, as a leader, I've certainly been known to make this mistake, and I'm sure you, like me, have, is at this point I go, I need to focus on the other fire that's burning. Let me race back here on the other project. And although we've taken incredible efforts to get that momentum turning, we're distracted and we move up here before we can make sure that we can sustain momentum. Mass times velocity, momentum. And yet it takes less effort, and it's a very simple thing to use. So look, these are I guess the premise that I'm getting to is maybe it's not that you don't have a strategy for customer loyalty or even team loyalty. Maybe your strategy needs a strategy for execution. This is what we found, these steps. Now in 20 minutes, and I've just received my 10-minute warning, is there's no way I'm going to take you through all of these steps. Here's the good news. Who likes free stuff? Excellent. This is the 10 seconds I get to pitch, so come and see us at the stand. I've written a book on this model. Don't freak out. It's a story. It's, party in the front, theory in the back. We'll give you a book. We also have an iPhone or Android app that is designed as a coaching tool that will ask you the critical questions, right? The quality of your questions guide your attention and the quality of the results that you get, and you can work your way through. But I would like to highlight some parts in this tool because my experience of sharing it with people is that they can get immediate results. So the first thing that came out is the first two steps of set direction and engage and excite are almost about creating the context for performance. When I was young, I had a slingshot. If any of you had a slingshot, it's like pulling back far enough on that slingshot with enough patience to ensure that you pull it back far enough so when you let go, not only does it go further, but it goes on target. The last two steps are all about driving that performance. Does that make sense? So we have that balance between setting the context and then driving performance. The other thing that came out was freaky. The other thing that came out is this marriage between rational and emotional. The first step is rational. The second step is emotional. The third step is rational, and the last one is emotional again. These two things link together. Now, having measured literally thousands of organizations around the world using this framework, I've only met one, a single one, whose scores on the emotional part were higher than their rational scores. And that just blew me away, right? By the way, they were the most lovely, innovative, creative bunch of people I've ever seen, and they're no longer in business, right? Isn't it interesting? Our rational, I studied law. What am I doing talking about a marketing thing or strategy is completely different. But our rational stuff gets us through on average. Most people I meet when it comes to this are decidedly average. I didn't say you guys, I just went most people. In order to be extraordinary, from a leadership perspective, my belief that I wanted to share is it's that marriage between rational and emotional. If you go back to Sydney the dog, playing the game or telling him he's going for a walk is rational. When I throw it and he's enjoying it, it's emotional. Him catching it is a rational action. When he returns to me and gets rewarded, it's emotional. It doesn't matter whether this works for our consumers or our teams or actually in our personal lives. It makes an incredible difference. Now, my interest is, and I'm sure yours is as well, as you go, oh, well, that's very nice, Glenn, right? But the reality is, what's the output? Otherwise, it's just a theoretical framework. So I wanted to share with you that. If we take a look at just the pink area, the set direction area, I apologize, I'm in your line of view. If you take either a conditional, because sometimes remember the crisis, our vision in my company was lock it down and survive. right? Really inspiring. So you either have a conditional vision or an aspirational vision for your consumer or for loyalty. You have an appropriate strategy, and you'll be hearing from a number of different speakers today about analytics and assessment. Predictive, prescriptive, causal. Do we really understand the customer? Here's the really interesting thing. Peter will get upset with me because he runs our analytics. Or you could just find Rebecca in your business who understands what I actually value in the relationship. How many Rebeccas do you have in your teams? Do you know who these people are? Do you reward them in that way? You will get a greater commitment to the customer. Next step, when people buy into what you're trying to do, true customer centricity, not just the word, not the buzz, not the Harvard article, truly wanting it, then believability goes up. We believe we've got the right strategy. And the best bit, desirability goes up, meaning you will have frontline staff or your teams doing the right behaviors, not because you tell them to, but because they want to. You will get an increase in advocacy. You can tap into the extra effort, or what I call discretionary effort, and that's when your boat moves the fastest. Now and only now are you ready to understand what the prioritized actions are from a skill set, mindset perspective, rather than training a scattergun of competencies. If you're here from HR, you're actually targeting like a sniper rifle exactly the competencies to ensure that the challenge that you're handing your teams directly match their level of competency. And last of all, you should look at your operational processes on a regular basis, or making sure that we're tapping into cloud technology or digital transformation to make sure that we're giving them the right tools. Last of all, we go into sustained momentum, right? Probably the easiest way to describe this is, imagine you had a dashboard of measures that enabled you to measure both the rational and emotional in a simple, practical way. We find that that tends to drive innovation, and when I say innovation, I'm not talking product extension, I'm talking revolutionary startup innovation. And last of all, you've created this, what we call win, learn, change, continuous improvement cycle, where people are really owning it as opposed to the leader having an umbilical cord down into your teams. Which means if you're not there, does this still continue, right? So I guess the premise I'm sharing is that I believe that customer loyalty is driven by employer loyalty. And if you buy into the premise that customer loyalty increases revenue or decreases the cost to serve in some cases, and then you agree that employee loyalty drives customer loyalty, then the question is, what drives employer loyalty? And the answer is you, us. And I don't know about you, but I swallow pretty hard at the end as I ask myself the question, do I come to work every day as a leader to get the job done? Or how many days do I turn up at work to create something transformational? Because the reality is, most people are average. Let me give two quick examples of this. Pret, I'm sure we've all eaten there. Fantastic food. If you go back, staff, normally European, they've come across for 2 years and they're working. I know I've got team members who love the fact that you can go in and order your food in Spanish or whatever. They're always smiling, always helpful. In fact, yesterday, Elena, who served me, gave me a coffee for free because every single staff member is empowered to give 5 coffees for free to whoever they want. If they don't, it goes on a performance record, right? But they're completely empowered. Until 2001, the Temple of Hamburger, McDonald's buys 33% of Pret. Right? They're now owned by a venture capital firm, but McDonald's was involved at the time. Literally overnight, hundreds and hundreds of staff in the UK handed in their resignations. The brand, all of a sudden, did not have the intimacy or relationship that they wanted. They sent a clear signal to the market. Pret went like that, and it's taken years for them to get it back to where it is now. Now, I'm biased. I mentioned my background at HP and Apple. Right? So I still walk, talk, present, manage, lead exactly the way that those two organizations taught me. But it juxtaposed that with Apple. This is a brand where people will even brand themselves permanently. Now, this is the first page that came up on Google yesterday. I won't show you the second page. It gets disturbing. Right? But you understand the difference. This is more than just being loyal. This is where it becomes a love brand. And it doesn't start with their advertising. It starts with having Apple on the inside and somehow branding it for life, right? So when we look at what we've shared, Here's, in summary, the cover. Loyalty requires a relationship, a bond, an intimacy, and we can measure that. Don't be average and just measure the rational. We are promiscuous, both ourselves, our teams, and also consumers. Squirrels get in the way, right? You cannot bribe true loyalty. You need to tap into the values and beliefs of the individual, whether that be your team or your consumers. Customer loyalty is driven by employer loyalty, and as I mentioned before, that's driven by you. So maybe your strategy needs a strategy. Oh, and by the way, while you're working really hard on doing this, strategy execution, or the IT security project you're on, or working with your teams or your consumers, just remember, you're probably somebody else's squirrel, and they're after your nuts. So did you get some value? Yeah? I'll go with a third of the room. That's probably a good start. Did you have a little bit of fun? Hopefully we've given you something that you can take action on. Over to John.